In fashion itself, I always had a kind of latent interest in it, but my actual start in selling and producing clothes was in 2016. The first piece I ever made actually was a Julian Baker fan merch piece. I was a big fan of her, and I missed a show, and they had some kind of exclusive merch or something like that there that I was bummed I didn't get. And I had a Bob Ross painting kit that one of my friends bought me for Christmas because I was really into Bob Ross, but I hadn't painted before. So it was just kind of collecting dust in my closet. And then I was like, wait, what if I painted on it? So I looked up fabric paint. I figured out that you could paint on clothes. And then I just kind of jury-rigged this terrible patchwork onto the back of a flannel so that I could have something to wear. Whenever you're first making art, you're like, I'm gonna put all of my emotions into this. And it's not that art isn't about emotion, but especially whenever you're making something like clothes, there is a dual aspect to it where you have to be an artist and then you also have to be a craftsman simultaneously. But allowing myself to not always have this great emotional output into clothes that would be draining to work on, and just letting myself paint some things for the sake of painting them. You know, I'm wearing a bee. I don't have any emotional attachment to bees, but it's one of my favorite pieces that I've made because I had a really, really fun time making it, and it looks really good. And then once you build upon that technique, you're better able to do emotional art because you can inform your technique with your emotion. That's my favorite part of painted clothes because it's such a perfect counterbalance to most of the commanding aspects of fashion in the fashion industry. Generally, the point of fashion is to find something that works, find something that people generally like, and then make it as many times as possible, then sell it on clearance racks eventually. It's something that you can do yourself. It's something that you can do on a really low budget if you have to, but you can create things that nobody else can possibly make, and even you can't recreate yourself. You're never going to be able to recreate the exact shading of something that you did. Never going to be able to recreate the exact line that you made because it's all slightly imperfect and slightly different from each other, but they're never going to be the same. And then on top of that, a lot of the times I used reclaimed clothes. So I'll thrift for things, I'll get stuff at vintage stores. If someone is like, I want that jacket, can you paint another one of that jacket for me? It's like, no, I don't even know where to get that jacket at, So it's making things that are specifically not able to be replicated as a counterbalance to a very replicatable field and industry. I mean, it's not economical. There's not a lot of clothing painters that can end up being super rich off of doing it because you're limited by the amount that you're able to paint. And you can only paint so much in a day. The point of it is to not replicate it. So yeah, that comes with roadblocks, but also if you try and go around those roadblocks, you lose the place that you were at before in the first place. There's kind of two stages to making a piece whenever I'm painting it. There's the thinking stage and then there's the non-thinking stage. So say on this bee jacket, painting the proportions of the eyes to the head, to the thorax, to the abdomen are very heavily thinking. You're using reference pictures, you're looking at images of bees, you're like, okay, are these proportions right? How should I do the perspective? Should the eyes be farther out? No, they're kind of recessed into the head, all that kind of stuff. But then you get to a point where you're doing all of these hairs to try and give it texture. And yeah, you're still thinking, you're like, okay, do I do gray to shade here and stuff like that? But a lot of what I do has a ton of repetitive motion within it. I'm doing vine designs where you're doing little sprigs of grass on each side, or I'm doing, a vine design where you're trying to naturally flow what you're doing. So there's parts of it that are very analytical, particularly because I'm not a highly trained artist. I haven't gone to art school, I haven't done a bunch of figure drawing and stuff like that. Sometimes whenever I'm doing a commission piece, it's the first time I'm trying to paint something like that. So there's a lot of, double checking and second guessing and hyper analyzing the way that I am putting things into the space of that piece. But then there's the parts where you just turn your brain off and you just let it go and you try and make it look very natural by not thinking about it too much. If you think about where you're putting every single hair, that's not how bees are in reality. You have to make it a little wild. You have to make it a little, off in some ways. You have to have some things that are askew. But clothes both represent a unique challenge. They add to that aspect of not being able to replicate what you're making because you're going to be changing your canvas every time. And then it's also just fun to wear the art that you make. For me, I care more about what I'm putting on my body than what I'm putting on my walls. You know, that isn't the case for everybody, but it's a very important thing of like how you're presenting yourself to the world. And to think that what I'm making is worthy of other people putting it on as their own personal shout into the world is very, very meaningful. It is just the best feeling to be like, I am making things that people want to physically put onto their body and have as a representation of themselves from afar. That is the coolest shit.